Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's see what we have. Too many comics. Okay, I did a video on this. It says Baron Perch on Perchington the Fourth. I'm upgrading or downgrading technically because I'd be a child of another Perchington. Anyway, it says I watched and enjoyed your video on how many comics are too many. While I agree with you on the wider market, 500 comics published by various publishers in a month serves various audiences and gives retailers the best possible chance to grow their businesses. I'm not sure I fully agree, but we'll get there. However, I disagree with you on Marvel and DC publishing as many good comics as they can. Marvel and DC are the load-bearing members of the comic industry. Indies, or semi-indies like Vertigo, depend upon them to generate foot traffic into the stores and even create the hobby of comic reading. People come into comics looking for Spider-Man and or Batman, then evolve into readers of other titles. That process is well established. The only difference is that now the new readers are adults coming from movies and TV and not kids coming from cartoons. I mean, mostly. I think, and this mail's going to go on, but I'll pause here for a second. I think that the comics conversation, people within comics, etc., have over exaggerated the impact of readers coming from movies, coming from TV, coming from cartoons. The biggest way readers came into comics was from, their parents, usually their mother, dragging them to the grocery store or, being picked up from school or walking home from school or biking home from school, stopping by the local convenience store, gas station, grocery store, and finding comics. That was the biggest influx of new readers. If you take a really wide view, if you take like the 1960s on view, that was the generator of new readers. It was always somewhat dubious, the idea that a TV show or cartoons would actually lead to a lot of comic sales. It did. I mean, you had like a Transformers cartoon, and then you had, kids buying Transformers comics because they had seen that on the cartoon, but they were already exposed to the material. I think there's a difference between I'm going to buy this comic for this character and I'm going to get myself into a store or I'm going to get myself to a place where comics are sold. The challenge is, a lot of retailers will tell you, is there's very little, I watched a movie, I'm going to hunt up a local comic shop and then I'm going to go there. A lot of people go to local comic shops today, the direct market, for curiosity and in many cases nostalgia is one of the biggest reasons. It reminds them of kind of a different world. It's something to kind of explore. But it's not really fit from there. And I point that out because earlier in the mail, you're talking about Marvel and DC being the load bearers. It's true. And it is true that people come in and typically start with the big two and then migrate out to indies, usually following a creator that has gone to the indies. People, when Rick Remender was on Uncanny X-Force and then Uncanny Avengers and then went off to do his own stuff, there were a bunch of readers who explored indies for the first time because they were following Remender. This is that, the bigger question is a video for another time is, why, people followed Todd McFarlane out of Marvel to Spawn, but why has Todd McFarlane not been able to, really maintain kind of a huge, dominant hold on the industry? It's anyway, I'm digressing. So that is happening, but the problem is that the retailer who's ordering the books, when confronted with 500, 600 titles, tends to get exhausted after Marvel and DC, and they often don't order the indie stuff for the shelf. They kind of rely on customers to tell them that they want it, and then they order it for their box. But that's not growing the market. It's really putting the burden on the reader to, be involved in comics beyond just reading them, to either be online or follow their creators and learn something's going on, and then talk to the retailer and get it ordered and wait 3 months and then it arrives. And sad to say that there's in that chain, a lot of people drop off. It's a lot of work to do that. It doesn't sound like a lot of work, but it is. There's too many factors involved where somebody goes, fuck it. And they just don't. And then you add in like, okay, you're struggling to get something that is going to be massive, delayed in your mind. Delayed meaning you're interested in something you heard announced. 3 months later, it comes out. It's going to cost $4, maybe $5. Yeah, the shipping schedule is going to be unreliable. I mean, like, there's just a lot of those are a lot of friction points. Absolutely, some people push through and do it, but it's all part of a bad chain. And I'm not saying the culprit or the main thing is that there's too many comics, but it doesn't help because having that volume of books on the shelf, yes, it's a lot of options and it's a lot of possibilities, and that's cool. But the person who's ordering the books does not get through the whole list, not even close. Anyway, let me keep reading here. It says, however, Marvel and DC do not have infinite latitude as brands. That's true. What a Marvel comic is defined as has changed over the years. In the 60s and 70s, the Jack Kirby inspired art style was definitional. In the 80s and 90s, the Image guys redefined the look of the X-Men and Spider-Man. In 2000s, 2010s, Bendis and Miller redefined their plots and their dialogues. DC went through a similar evolution with Sticker House art style in the 60s and 70s, Alan Moore and Frank Miller redefining the tone of the line for the 80s and 90s, and then the DCAU influence in the current century. Yeah. There's a lot more names in there, of course, that you could bring into the picture, but I always think there's a skip between Kirby and then Image guys. I think you had Buscema, you had Romita, you had Ditko, you had a lot of people in there, and then you had the Paul Smiths, and you had Romita Jr., and you had Mike Zeck, and you had Art Adams, and you had Ed John Byrne certainly played a major force in both companies. You had that step in between. I find that a lot of people that middle step between Kirby and Image is getting forgotten over the years, and that it saddens me because I think a lot of those people are legends. You have Bob Layton in there. You have George Perez. Just some pretty incredible people. Anyway, but there is certainly continuity to the brands. But there is a certain continuity to the brand. Sorry. Marvel's more action-oriented and artist-driven. DC is slicker and sexier with wider latitude given to writers partly as a result of their own multiverse. When readers try to pick up a title with DC or Marvel on the title, they expect something consistent with their brands. A comic can be very good and still not be what readers want from the publishers. It seems like modern editors really struggle with their most important role, keeping brand consistency. The recent Fire and Ice comic and the forthcoming Harley Quinn fart special are perfect examples of this phenomenon. Even if both comics are great, they should not exist. Well said. And they're not great. Anyway, it's unfair. We haven't seen the fart book. Maybe this is going to be the next Watchmen. Who knows? The art and tone for Fire and Ice was inconsistent with the funny, sexy brand that Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, Kevin Maguire, and especially Adam Hughes had established for those characters. Casual fans to the DCAU would find that comic even more baffling. I think it's that group, that second group, that's the big problem. Yes, you're. I mean, yeah, you're frustrating the people who were there, who had grown up on this stuff, who were expecting kind of Keith Giffen, Kevin Maguire, bwahaha type comedy. But if you're new to comics, this is just, it makes absolutely no sense because a lot of the books now are somewhat leaning on that style, just doing it very poorly or doing it in a very weird way. And so, aggravating to people who read the book, but at least they have some context. If you're a new reader, you're like, what in the world? I had this experience, and I know this is bagging on a popular topic on the internet, but I had this experience with somebody coming in to buy, Miss Marvel, or sorry, not Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel. And they watched the movie Captain Marvel, and lots of people shit all over Brie Larson in the movie, but the movie, by and large, was, it was a kind of straight. I mean, its biggest sin was that it was dull. It was just an action movie that was kind of dull. You pick up the comic and like Captain Marvel is getting lunch with Spider-Woman and cats, and it's like what for people who watched the movie and enjoyed it, or even thought, it's another entry in the Marvel universe, this comic made no goddamn sense. Anyway, I said same thing for Historia, by the way, and this is also a video for another time, but Wonder Woman Historia, I'll die on this hill. I do not understand at all the people who are fluffing that book like it's the second coming of Jesus. That book is, I do not get it. I don't. Comics for, there's different comics for everybody. But what the hell? Anyway. It says whether, back to the mail, we're almost done. Whether Marvel or DC release 8 comics a month or 80, they should all be consistent with their brands and audience expectations. This is why Marvel in particular is producing far too many comics. Tom Brevoort's X-Men line alone is trying to produce something for everyone. That is exactly wrong. Uncanny X-Men, the early Claremont years, was never for everyone. It was feminist with a strong BDSM subtext. Ah, I, yeah, I don't know about that. Anyway, as a longtime X-Men reader, I get it, and I think people look back on that line with that kind of in mind. But it was gritty action. You know, were there feminist overtones? Sort of. But if you lived in the '80s and you collected those books, it wasn't bang you over the head feminist. It wasn't. You look at the relationship with Colossus and Kitty and some of this stuff. Now, I mean, it's a BDSM. BDSM. I mean, clearly Claremont's fetishes were, were on display at different times. But anyway, I wouldn't. I'm not saying those things weren't there. I'm saying I don't think that's the headline of those books. But maybe you're not either. In fairness, and I'm also derailing your point, which is correct. Is that X-Men, and comics in general are not for everyone. They're not. They shouldn't be for everyone. I see that from time to time. Comics are for everyone. No, they're not. Comics are meant to be for the audience they're writing for. It's like, it'd be like if you picked up a book, if you picked up the Hunger Games book, and you're like, the Hunger Games is for everyone. No, it's not. It's written for a specific audience. It's written for a very specific genre. It is YA romance with some action in there. That's what it is. It's not. If I put Hunger Games in front of my grandfather, he would not. It's not for him. The thing that's gotten twisted around in comics is it says the statement should be anyone should be free to enjoy comics. Comics, anyone can get into comics. I'm on board with that statement. Makes sense. But comics are for everyone. No, comics are not. Comics are for the audience they're written for. Anyway, sorry. It says its characters looked weird when compared to other superheroes at the time. Every time the franchise surged in popularity, it was doing something potentially alienating to someone. Or specific, I might add. That's why Marvel and DC altering their properties in the name of representation has been so damaging. A reader looking at Steve Rogers as Captain America and getting Sam Wilson doesn't come back. The same reader is exactly who might have picked up an issue of Miss Marvel. That's all. I think that's the end of the mail. It just it just ended. Anyway, it's a good mail. It's well thought out, and I appreciate you writing it. Disagree on some points, but that's what makes it fun. But the overall, your overall idea, I think, is correct. And you said you disagreed with me. I don't think we do disagree on the topic of Marvel and DC have a specific brand. They have a tone, maybe is a better way to put it, of what the book should be. If they're going to branch out, it's why DC did Vertigo. If you want to do something experimental, you want to have a different tone, then you need to separate it from your main line, aggressively separate it. So it has a different vibe, a different style that's happening. And if you don't do that, it alienates old fans and it doesn't bring in new fans. I think one of the biggest lies the comic industry has told itself, and it is a lie, is that, it's like, well, we're doing this to attract new readers, meaning changing the tone of the book, doing a silly WASP title. I didn't, by the way, I pick on that book a lot. I didn't hate it more than other books. There's plenty of books I think are much, much worse. But it is an example of a book they were heavily pushing at the time of, this book is for a new audience. It's like, yeah, except you're selling it to the direct market and you're selling it with characters that appear in regular superhero books that have an established tone and expectation, and it doesn't work. Sam Wilson is by far, I think, one of the examples of the biggest almost character assassinations you can do in comics. You had, a Anthony Mackie, a very charismatic, good actor who's out there making the Falcon popular in the movies, legitimately popular. And there was an opportunity there to just make a badass Falcon book, put some top tier talent on it, meaning your biggest writer, your biggest artist at the time, put it there. And there is a world where the Falcon would have been a, top selling book. And, it was right there. It absolutely would have happened. The movie audience was there. Like I said before, I don't think the movie audience was flooding into comic stores, but there was an aura of cool. And people who are reading comics are also watching the movies, and they already know where the comic shop is. And the idea you can make the Falcon cool and have another character that's a top character for you is great. I mean, we've heard Marvel complain about, well, we always have to go back to the same old, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, and Wolverine, and it's like the same old collection of characters. Well, there's a moment where you had another one that you could have put in that mix. You'd elevated somebody. And instead, the comic company, the publisher got their head wrapped around the idea of, no, 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 why can't a black man be Captain America? It's a dumb question. It's a comic book, and you're the owner of it and the writer of it, so you can do whatever the fuck you want. You know, an alien, a rock, a golden retriever, anyone can be Captain America. Anyone. It was right there for you. There was no reason why there was no black guy can't be Captain America. Of course, he can be Captain America, but that's not a point you need to prove in comics. And more importantly, that was followed up with we want comics for everyone. We want comics that everyone can enjoy. Cool, except you got, lower sales as Sam Wilson and Captain America, and you got fewer people. You had everyone there with the Falcon. You had people who were willing to come into the mix, but instead you basically changed. You had people who had expectations of who Captain America was. You didn't deliver on those expectations. And then you insulted the people who were buying comics all along as why don't you accept this? And comics, Marvel and DC do have a tone and a brand, and you can stretch from that, but you can't stretch to a breaking point from that. And I guess that's the point. And if you're publishing, 80 comics to get them on the shelves, I think, and you have editorial that's not maintaining the brand, I think you run a huge risk that you blow that all up. And then you get nothing. Anyway, good mail, good thought provoking. Went a little long on this. That's okay. Thanks for listening.